everybody. We decided to start a few minutes early because we have a very large topic here, bending the arc of human potential through radical scaled online learning models. You have to love California, right? I mean, brought to you by California. My name is Mitchell Stevens. I'm a sociologist on the faculty in the Graduate School of Education at Stanford and faculty chair of a program called Education Enterprise, which is a joint venture of the Graduate School of Education and the Computer Science Department at Stanford. Our guests today are, and I'm told not to introduce them because that's what your machines are for, right? You probably already know them in any case, are Michael Cunningham from National University, Andrew Hermalyn from 2U, and Betty Vandenbosch from Purdue University Global. We have some rules here. No formal introductions, no slides, and a focus on engaging and provocative discussion. We're going to save the last 10 minutes at least for a town hall in the group. So I will be quite vigorous with time. But meanwhile, you're going to hear from a few of us. There's no question that our sector is just now coming to recognize the scale of opportunities afforded by artificial intelligence, machine learning, and not only mass personalization, mass delivery, but mass personalization. That opportunity comes with some very large questions, though. For example, what kind of ecosystem will foster cumulative improvement in educational technology? Did you get that word? Cumulative improvement in educational technology. Maybe collective improvement in educational technology. And can private industry all by itself create that ecosystem? Or do we need other players in that system as well? Government, philanthropies, research universities. You can see that I'm completely unself-interested in the questions that we're talking about this afternoon. So that's just a place where we might start. I've invited each of our panelists to make opening remarks of their choice. They might choose to answer the question, why did you accept the invitation to be on this panel?
I'd like Michael to start.
Well, what I like to do is frame it a little bit with a little preamble first. And I like to set the stage a little for what we're talking about today. You know, Michael Porter out of Harvard would say that right now we're in a period of punctuated equilibrium brought upon by digitization and other forces. But there's a weird phenomenon that's going on in the post-secondary education sector right now. And that is when the other sectors have been punctuated, that rapidly there has been a big decrease in the cost of goods and services by those institutions. Think about your TV. You know, I think about when I was in college, I bought a 36-inch Trinitron CRT tube, weighed around 70 pounds, and it cost me around $600. Now I can get a 50-inch TV, cost me around $110. And this is 20, 30 years later. So other sectors use digitization and use this punctuation as a way to reduce costs. But in higher education, we haven't reduced the cost. And why is that? So that's going to be a big conversation that we'll talk about today. At the National University System, we've been doing a lot of work at trying to reduce the cost of education, increase the student learning outcomes, and make sure that our graduates actually fill jobs that are necessary for the future and really get that skills gap filled. I'll just take 2 seconds on National University was the founding institution of the National University System. We were a first mover in online learning over 20 years ago. So we're excited about that. We also have City University of Seattle, which we're blessed with the president right here, Randy Frisch. They're up in 6th and Wall. We have John F. Kennedy University, which we've implemented our Flex course, which is a variable paced system. And we also just did a wonderful affiliation with North Central University, which is a totally online, one-to-one format for graduate students, master's, and doctoral students. And last but not least, we have the Stanford programs. Now, all of you have been walking around seeing the picture of Denny Stanford out there, who's our big benefactor. Denny Stanford is one of the world's most generous philanthropists. To date, he's donated over $1.7 billion in the last 10 years to education, mostly children's education, research at ASU and also at National University, stem cell research, cancer research, and a host of other areas. So I'm happy to say that we have Denny Sanford in the audience, and I'd like to give him a round of applause. Denny. And I want to be here because you're a bunch of nice folks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Hermalyn. I am president at 2U. I am also our founding intern. So I've been there from day one, 11 years. I like that title more than the current one. So a couple of reasons why I'm excited about the discussion. First, as Betty and I were talking about back there, it's really hard to decode the title of but we all know what the words mean. So what we were trying to figure out was, sort of where to start. And 2U, 2U powers the best digital education hybrid experiences with top universities globally. For the vast majority of our history, we've been focused on full degree programs. But in the last 2 years or so, we've now made 2 acquisitions that have moved us into both short courses, short form content, and our announcement on Monday with the acquisition of Trilogy is now boot camps and technical skills and training. And one of the things we announced to our partner base at our annual partner meeting back in February was what we're calling the Career Curriculum Continuum. And the idea is, how do we help put universities at the central point of lifelong learning and enabling lifelong learning? And if I think about my own personal sort of experience, I went to Lehigh University undergrad. It's actually a little sad as to what my affiliation with Lehigh is today. It is largely around giving and a quarterly call asking for money. It's not engagement in skills. It's not that there's no mechanism to continue to be taught by incredible faculty and incredible institution, and that allows the flexibility and both accessibility of what they have to offer. And so the continuum is really the company's sort of product strategy in the areas in which we believe we will help power our university partners to engage learning, whether it's a student who is looking for a career change, or it's an undergrad, or it's someone who is looking just to reskill in an area that they're in. Obviously we're all here. It's an incredibly exciting time for higher ed, and how we integrate different forms of content into, again, enablement of lifelong learning is really exciting. So that's what I'm personally most excited about with respect to this discussion.
Great, thank you.
So I've never been called radical in my life. And I was wondering what that would feel like. So here I am.
All right.
How do you feel?
Not very radical. We all have the same objective in mind. We want more people to get more education exactly when they need it, so that we will raise up our entire society, right? There's nobody that doesn't want that. And we all have models to help us get to that. I don't think that there's one best way to do it. And I think that part of the value of today is to talk about different models, different ways that we're thinking about these challenges, and to debate whether or not these models are good enough, whether we need to have other models, whether they work for some people most of the time, most of the people some of the time. That's what we want to get to today. And the model that I'll put forward is, when I talk about it sort of in short form, it almost sounds trite. But the reality is we help adult learners. And for adult learners, they don't have enough time and they don't have enough money to finish school. And it's our job to help them finish anyway. So what we focus on is figuring out how to stack credentials, how to give people just the knowledge that they need, just when they need it, but then keep track so that when they need more, they can come back and take another bite at the apple. And the way that we've done that is through our curriculum. Our curriculum is completely modularized, so you don't have to take it in course chunks anymore. You can take it in what we call modules, which are 1-credit pieces. When you've got a 1-credit piece, you can take 1 from here and 2 from there and 3 from over here, and you've got something that you need right now. The other thing that you can do when you've got these little pieces is you bring in your work experience. You know, last time I checked, most work experience did not fit into courses, but it can fit into modules. Little chunks of learning that you add up that turn into something so an adult doesn't have to relearn something they already know. So that's the basics of the model that I'd like to talk about as one of I don't know, again, I don't think it's all that radical. I think it's pretty much common sense. But so if we could change radical to common sense, I would like that a lot.
All right.
Well, it's a great honor to be on this stage. I am like a kid at Christmas at ASU GSV. At the same time as this meeting, there's the largest meeting of educational researchers. It's called the American Educational Research Association. It's in Toronto, right? This is where the ideas are, right? And this is where the enthusiasm and ambition is. So, and it's very well represented on this stage. Should we talk about technology or money?
They're related.
They're related. Let's talk about money first, okay? Per Michael's earliest comment, this cost-price relationship, right? How should we be thinking about that in higher education? And you understand the university I work for, right, does not want to talk about cost and price, all right? The organizations that you work for are obliged to talk about cost and price, at least at present, in different ways. And so, how do we talk about that responsibly, either as educators or as business people?
So I can talk to that. I think the first thing that we all have to recognize is you get what you pay for. Again, it's trite. But the reality is that for some students, for lots of students, they can pretty much learn on their own. And for them, they don't need all these supports to help them with their education. Everybody knows that Abraham Lincoln never went to law school, but he learned on his own. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for everybody. We aren't all as clever as Abraham Lincoln was. So some folks need more supports. And the question is not how much should it cost. The question is, how are we as a society going to pay for it? That is the issue that I think we have to deal with. Recognizing not everybody needs everything, recognizing that money and quality aren't directly related, but recognizing that some people need more support than others, and that support can't just be an AI bot.
Yeah.
That might help, but it's not going to be everything.
Others?
I think if you break it down, and that was very well said, and I agree with that, if you break it down, there's 3 real pillars of the cost of education, especially in the adult learning space. And that's you have the cost of acquisition. You can see all the commercials on TV. You see all the social media. So cost of acquisition. You have the instructional cost, and you have infrastructure cost. So for sake of purposes, let's just say it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. What we need to do, and that's where we can use technology, is to reduce that cost of acquisition, to reduce the infrastructure cost. Here, at National, we're getting rid of a lot of brick and mortar because basically we're switching. Most of our students are demanding online, anytime, any place, any pace type of solution. So we need to meet them where they need to be. We have 3 campuses in LA. It takes them 2 hours to get to the campus. So especially adult learners. So we have to actually reduce those costs. But think about this. If you can significantly, through the use of technology and best practices, reduce the cost of infrastructure by 50%. Reduce the cost of student acquisition by 75%. You have extra money to actually put into student services and teaching and learning instructional costs. And that way you can actually reduce the cost of education while increasing the student learning outcomes. Really exciting. Another thing that has to do with pricing and cost. Don't get tuition and cost confused because they're 2 different things. Anyone can lower their price of tuition, but if the cost isn't lowered, that's a spiral downhill. So what we're thinking about, if we can use this technology and use these best practices to reduce the cost, we can actually bring down the cost below $5,000 a year for our students. Because the number one issue for adult learners right now, the number one issue about going back to school, remember there's 30 million students out there, or adults, that have some college but didn't finish. 30 million. We're going to have 6 million jobs that need to be filled by the end of next year that we don't have the credentials for the folks to fill those jobs. 6.5 million by 2023. The first place we as a society need to look for are those students that have some college and help them get through. But their biggest concern is, do I pay for college or do I pay for rent or my mortgage? Do I pay for my kids' education or do I pay for my education? There's a $56,000 delta between a high school graduate of some college and a master's degree in earning potential. So think about it. From a societal standpoint, we need to help these students get their degrees, get their credentials, so that they can fill these wonderful jobs.
I would just add real quick on the same topic. I mean, technology, it enables flexibility and accessibility, and it's the opportunity cost to get a great education from a great school. You know, we have students in our programs that are, you know, in our USC teaching master's program that live in LA because the cost of getting in the car, sitting in LA traffic to attend the beautiful USC campus, it doesn't work and doesn't scale over time because the needs of society are very different than they were even a year ago. I mean, it's ever changing. So tech is a very clear solution to enabling anyone who wants to learn, you know, at any stage to do that. So I agree with that.
Let me ask one more money question. Let's and it gets back to Betty's earlier point, which is let's imagine a world in which a year of college at an excellent institution costs $5,000 US. Who should pay that $5,000? Whose responsibility is that bill, on your view? You said something called society, but that's a really big box.
And I am not promoting, you know, free university education, not at all. But I do think that we have to think about why it is that we have so many people that can't get to university, that are afraid to go to university. Is it because we've let them down prior to university and we should now help them get there? Or is it because it's too expensive for them? I don't believe that anybody who has the capacity to go to university can't find a way to get there. However, I do think that it gets harder and harder and harder the further along you go. And it is our responsibility as a society to make sure that that's an option for people who want it. And that might be grants, that might be scholarships, that might be financial aid, that might be ISAs. I love ISAs. I don't know if it's an income share agreement. I think most people in this audience would know that. There are many ways to make it work, but we have to be creative about it.
Isn't it, it's also about, wouldn't you say it's also about motivation though? It's not just what it costs, it's an individual's motivation to want to get an education, that want to learn. Uh-oh, you have your fist now.
I don't believe that any adult that says, I would like to get a degree, has an issue with motivation. They have an issue with competing requirements on their time. It's not, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. Once they say, I should really get a degree, and I think of this 30 million, at least half have no interest. And that's fine, I don't mind. 15 million is enough. But I do think that it's not a motivation every day having to decide, well, do I really want to go to school today?
It's the trade-offs?
It's the trade-offs.
Well, you know, I agree that there's, it's not a homogeneous marketplace. We talk about the motivation for a student and why they want to go back to school. But what I do think, though, it's a polarization that can happen if we don't treat it properly, because you have underserved communities. You know, 60% of our student body are minority-based, and many of them from underserved communities. If you have one flavor fits all, then you put people that say, you know, I can't afford to go back to college, but someone else can, and that middle class disappears, and then you have that polarization. So we as a society have to acknowledge that. Now, I think there's a really great opportunity for us now. When we talk, you have all these jobs that are going to be there, that are there and can't get filled by people with the talent, right? The biggest challenge that organizations have, not only businesses, but NGOs and the government, is getting qualified people that have the required skills, attracting them, keeping them, and then training them as they go along so that they can upskill. Well, guess what? That answers your question. Who can actually pay for it? There's an incentive for businesses. Right now, $650 million a year corporations are paying to train their employees. $650 million. But corporations, if you work for any organization like I work for, I have a bunch of board members that make sure every penny we spend is spent right and that we don't overpay for anything. So the question is, if you have the government that's paying, well, you know, tuition is tuition and they pay that percentage. But if you have a corporations that are paying, they really dig deep and say, what is the value of that education? What is the lowest cost I can pay and what is the highest outcomes? Because I'll tell you what will happen in this marketplace, this post-secondary, especially in online learning, is going to be in for a big shock. You know, I would say in around 5 years right now, because any other sector, the actual cost of the product or service that's been disrupted goes to the incremental marginal cost of that delivery of that product or service. So when you reach a certain scale, and that's why scale is so important, when you reach a certain scale, the incremental cost is much less than it is for the initial sunk cost that you have to build that organization to support. So what happens is there's going to be a dramatic decrease, in my opinion anyway, decreasing in the pricing of education, and corporations are going to pay more of their share of that tuition dollars.
So let's segue gradually into the tech side, and I want to do that in a peculiar way. The first computational revolution, the one that happened between 1950 and 1975, was substantially underwritten by the federal government. The federal government built the infrastructure on which all of this was built, right? And Americans supported that project with tax dollars and tax subsidies quite enthusiastically because we were engaged in a global military and ideological conflict with an enemy that was broadly presumed to be our enemy, right? And that lays the foundation, you know, for the kind of conversation we're having today. But on my view, we're now having a conversation in which government is at most a kind of abstraction, or maybe a hindrance, or maybe it's a poorly regulated venture capital firm, or we're not really sure. Like, does government play a role of any sort, on your view, in how we're going to bend this arc of human potential through online scaled learning models, or should we just leave government to the 20th century?
How do we really feel, or what do we think is going to happen?
Are you going to grade us?
Yeah.
Are there any Department of Education
here's
folks
the
in
way
the
I look
audience?
at it, all right? There will be a next presidential administration.
Yes, there will be.
And that next presidential administration might want advice from experts in our field, right? What advice from experts in our field will we give the next presidential administration about bending the arc of human potential through radical scaled online learning models?
Daddy, I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
So maybe it is radical, I don't know. So I think what we all have to remember is that industry is spectacular. Spectacular. It does all this great stuff, and it ebbs and flows. And the chance that in the next decade, I didn't say it was going to happen, in the next decade that there will be a downturn is greater than zero, I would say. The consequence of that downturn is that the folks who today are scrambling because we're at under 4% unemployment will stop scrambling. And the folks who are willing to pay $52.50 for everybody that walks in the door in order to give them some education, so maybe they'll get the skills that they need for that job they've got today, that's going to drift away a little bit. And so we have to figure out, is that okay, or should we have something that's a little more permanent as we think about this arc of human potential? And I'm not, as I said, I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the government, but I'm not convinced that it's industry either. I think it's a collaboration. I think that universities play a big role in helping figure that out, and in helping figure out the best way to teach the most.
Others?
I mean, I agree that it's not just government. I think it's government, universities, it's nonprofits. We all play a role in some form. there's clearly not an easy answer to it, but I don't disagree that it's not an important topic that we all should be thinking about in some way. I also don't think that it's one size fits all, right? I mean, our models are a bit different. They're similar in some ways, but the reality is I don't think that there's a hard set sort of rule that should be set, and I also don't think government is the only player in the solution.
Okay.
Or the problem.
I agree, and I also think that there's a very important conversation we all need to have. And the conversation goes around what is the value of a college education and who should pay for it. That's a topic we're talking about right now. The same discussions that we're having now happened in the 1950s, talking about the value of a high school education. Why does everyone need to go to high school? And at that point in time, the statistics showed that 40% or so of the population felt that you didn't need a high school. You become an electrician, a plumber, you go into the military, whatever, that was a fine. Become a fireman like my folks and all that. But now if you look at retrospectively, you look back and say, of course everyone needs a high school education. And the government should pay for that high school education. So the question becomes, especially when you look at the pay differences and where we are with these gaps, we need to create opportunities for every person that has a desire to go to university to get through there. And there has to be a partnership, public-private partnerships that have to come to fund that. And by no means, the student should not be left off the hook. And I agree with Betty on the sharing of benefits, and you can pay depending on what you earn. But there are certain professions out there that we are particularly have to take care of, and that are teachers. Because if you think about it, and I had this discussion with the president of WASC last week, talking about the profession of teaching as one of the only professions that isn't compensated accordingly to the impact they have on students. So we as a society have to figure out how do you measure the impact of teachers? How do you reward them for the success that they have in the classroom with our future generations? And it can't all be dollars and cents. So that's something that we have to address. So the conversation, I don't know what the answer is, but it's going to be a public-private partnership.
Teachers, are those human beings you're talking about?
Yes, not robots.
Okay, all right, just checking.
Yeah.
So another way, moving toward in the technology direction, you guys are all at the forefront of very ambitious, canny, creative organizations. Do you have all the science and technology you need to get where you want to go? And if you don't have all the science and technology that you need, what do you want, and how might we get there?
There's lots that we want and need. You know, all that we can do at our institution, we have this thing called the research pipeline. And so we take research that comes from institutions like yours, and we try it in our classrooms. And we say, okay, is this going to work for our students? It looks good in the lab with whomever it was tested with. Does it work for us? And we don't get nearly enough of that. We need people to do research, to explore, to test, to try. And we can come up with ideas, but we're not an institution that can come up with enough ideas on our own. I don't think any single institution is. So we do need support from universities, from the government, from the grant writing that folks do to get money from the NSF, to study what are the best ways to educate. What does neuroscience know today that we didn't know 15 years ago when we created all our coursework? We need work there. We need a lot of work there, because if we can make learning more efficient and more fun and faster, hallelujah, it'll be cheaper. But we need research and technology combined to get there.
For us, our partnerships are with, great colleges and universities. The best researchers are the faculty, right? They know their fields exceptionally well. And so for us, I don't think any of us have all the science and technology that we would want, because every day there's something new and it's changing. But for us, it's how do we empower faculty who are teaching in, 2U powered programs to look at whether it's, the efficacy of teaching online versus in the classroom, right? Masters in teaching at USC, it's not only looking at the output of the students in the online program, but how do they differ when they're 5, 10, 15 years out of school in the classroom, right? And how do how do you measure that? So I think for us, it's utilizing and empowering our faculty to really think much more broadly about the research possibilities that there are with technology. Because one quick thing I'd say with Michael, I mean, you mentioned both my parents are retired but special education teachers their whole lives, right? Middle school and high school.
Get their degree at National?
What's that?
Did they get their degree at National?
They did not.
Right.
I wish I could say yes. They did not, but like, if you think about high school for a second, what technology affords is it's a much larger, broader audience of impact. Because in the classroom, over the lifetime of a 20, 30-year career, you might be educating, 3,000, 4,000 students, right? And with tech and online, you're talking millions. You're talking millions and millions. And so the impact, I think, is felt very differently. And so I think, research and, science and tech, they all play an integral part into what that looks like over time.
Michael, you get the last word on this, then we'll open it up to you guys.
Okay. When it comes to resources and technologies, what we try to do is, first of all, we ask our question, put business principles. Do we buy, do we build, or do we partner? Because you can't build everything yourselves, and a lot of smart people out there, especially in this room right here. So we're always looking for great partners in the ed tech space and the pedagogy space to partner with. And then some instances, university now, we bought that platform, that FlexCourse platform, which was a Silicon Valley-based platform, spent $60, $70 million, and we were able to get that relatively inexpensively. So we acquired that. But buy, build, or partner is very important for us. We also use a wonderful format, and it's a zone-to-win format. And this is why we put a model on how we finance technology. So if you have our performance zone, basically, that's a zone where you have your regular operations that are going on right now, and that's the cash cows, that pays all the payroll and does everything. But then you have an area called the transformation zone. And that's where we put in our new technologies. We spend around $20 million a year in new technologies. Some make it, some don't make it. But the goal is that the money that we put into the research, and we partner with folks, data analytics, both artificial intelligence, platform-based stuff, all goes into that zone. The expectation has to be within 3 years, those technologies have to account for at least 10% of our revenues. And if it's not going to, you fail fast, because if you say it's not scalable and you bet on 1 or 2 of those major things and you partner with other organizations that can help you get there. The exciting thing about the group up here, and I want to say this for all of us and for all of you out there that are ed tech suppliers, we have something you need, and that's students. You have something that we need, and that's the best technology in ed tech. So if we can partner together and find out what's best for our students, how do we drive that cost down, bend the cost curve, and increase student learning outcomes, we're your partner.
Okay, here's how this is going to work. I want you to raise your hand boldly and courageously, and then stand up and tell us who you are. We're going to collect 4 questions, one right after the other. And then we're going to let these guys respond however they want to bits and pieces. So we get at least 4 voices in the room. Yes, sir, in the back.
Hi, my name is Miles. I'm a student at Stanford University. My question is, hi. Is it on?
Just say
Hi,
it.
my name is Miles. I'm a graduate student in School of Education at Stanford. My question is higher education a public or private good, and what should it be?
Okay, that's 1. 2. No questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, Daniel Blackman, founder of a company called SmashCut. Oh, sorry. Hi, Daniel Blackman, founder of a company called SmashCut. We're an OPM for film and media collaborative learning. I'm wondering if you feel that there is a lack of arts-focused programs across the online learning space. A little self-interested question there, but I am, not concerned about that, but I'm curious about that.
Number 3. Going once. Yes, behind you, sir. The gentleman with the microphone. Yes.
Hi, I'm Hal Plotkin, a recovering U.S. Department of Education worker.
All right.
You didn't raise your hand when Michael
Professional.
asked.
Full disclosure.
Incognito. It's been mentioned here today and probably in a dozen other panels, the claim that there are millions of open, high-paying jobs that are going. Are you aware of the noise in that data? The fact that before I was a government employee, I used to work for CNBC, covered Wall Street. Public companies are under an enormous amount of pressure to claim they have open jobs. The minute the CEO of a public company says they're not hiring anyone, their stock price tanks. So they all say they have open jobs, even when they're firing people. Enron supposedly had 300 open jobs the day it went bankrupt. And yet, the claims that are made that there are these open jobs that exist sort of serve the industry of higher education by bringing people in the door. Are you aware of any peer-reviewed studies that look in a rigorous way at these claims? And how confident are you about the workforce needs that you're trying to address?
Number 4. Yes, ma'am.
Here, wait, you need this.
Nice teamwork.
Yes.
Love that.
Social emotional learning. They went through the
Hi,
Stanford
I'm Kim
Harmony program.
Folsom. I am the founder of an accelerator and a venture fund for underserved founders. And there's a gap with regards to the number of underrepresented minorities, women in STEM. And how are you guys going to address that gap that's growing continuously?
Thank you. Have at it. Anything you want.
We should have taken notes on the
Yeah.
questions. I'll start the first one. Public.
Yeah.
I believe that the responsibility for education is the public ourselves, and we're all the public. So there's private partners, responsibilities, private, public. But at the end of the day, our society is as a United States of America, and our global society is dependent on educated, well-trained people. So I think it's a responsibility for all of us.
Daniel, right? I'd love your question on whether arts and humanities, right? Are they underserved in the online space? That was generally right. What I like about the question, Mitchell knows this, is so I studied sociology at Lehigh. There aren't many online sociology master's programs that exist, or bachelor's for that matter. Largely because market potential, not nearly as large as nursing or education or MBA. The other is what I have found in talking with a lot of faculty is that it's one of those things where they know the subject, they've been teaching it the same way for 30, 40, 50, 100 plus years, in some ways doesn't really change in many of their minds. And so the notion of going online and digital is more scary, I think. Now, I think the way we solve this is, we have a number of programs where if you think about like a degree program that, in our case, we launch, it doesn't look the same even, 6 months post-launch, or a year after launch, because you're constantly iterating, whether it be concentrations, tracks, focus areas. And so I think what's super interesting is we have a number of university partners who are thinking about what the next sort of gen MBA program looks like, or next teaching master's program look like, and how do we integrate, whether it be drama or arts or sociology or anthropology or those types of courses into a broader, sort of more specialized curriculum than having sort of standalone. So yes is my response to that, but I think the notion of interdisciplinary opportunities that exist. The one final thing I'll say is I think universities have a really hard time getting their individual deans to talk with one another, right? To leverage great faculty across the institution base. And it's one of those things that we try to push really hard. It's like you leverage the interdisciplinary nature of really specialized great faculty in super compelling ways, and that's not an easy conversation, right? Because they all have their territories. They don't want anyone to touch it. So I think we're going to see more of that. No question, is interdisciplinary across, whether it's a degree or a short course or boot camp even.
1 minute for Betty Vandenbosch.
To answer 2 questions. It's a great point. I don't know of anything on STEM. I don't. On STEM, I truly believe that online is an equalizer in STEM. Let me tell you why. 44% of the students in our university are underrepresented minorities. Nobody knows that. I didn't even know that till I asked somebody, because they're online. And more than 70% of our students are women. We are launching STEM programs quickly, partly because of our new affiliation. We now have access to wonderful subject matter experts at Purdue University who are helping us create very strong programs in cybersecurity, cloud computing, data analytics. And we really hope that women and underrepresented minorities are going to come to those degrees. Now, there's lots we have to do to enable that because they have to feel comfortable. And so what we do is we work, we're not always 100%, but we work at ensuring that our staff look like our students. And that's a concrete effort that we are making. And in some divisions, it's spectacular. I wish I could introduce you to our career services group. They look perfect. That's not the case everywhere, and we're working on
Can I
it.
answer the stat question?
You bet.
All right, since I was the one that threw out the statistics, I feel I owe you an answer. There's a center at Georgetown University that studies it very, very closely, number one, so I'm going to triangulate that. So we took the information as far as the jobs that were going to be needed 2020 and 2023, and we got the data from Georgetown. And then what we do is triangulate that with Randstad, as one of our board members is a major officer at Randstad, which is the world's largest temporary employment agency in the world. And they have their own data saying how it is such a tight market, especially in certain fields, healthcare fields, technological fields, ones that are obvious. That's where a disproportionate amount of the jobs are coming. And then the third part of the triangle is we look at how we have a hard time. The associations that, our universities have a hard time hiring employees and keep retaining employees because the cost of hiring is going up, up, and up. So the marketplace is telling us it, the universities are telling us, and the private sector is telling us.
Andrew, 30 seconds.
Thank you.
All right. Andrew, that was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you very much.